For November 16th, we have 6 board members present, and Ms. Costilla is out today. Let's begin with our pledge of allegiance to the American and Texas flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to the
Texas, one state,
under God,
one and indivisible. We'll begin with the order of canvassing of the November 3rd school board election for the purpose of electing 2 trustees. You just need a motion?
I move that we approve the order of canvassing of election.
Do I hear a second? Okay, Ms. Hanson moves and Ms. Halsey seconds. All in favor? 6. All opposed? 0. Go to the oath. We're going to administer the oath of office to each individual elected on November 3rd.
District 1.
District 1? We'll start with District 1.
Yeah, Judge, if you want to join me, and I actually have my parents here, so if y'all 4 would like to join me as well up here. They have put up with every election that I have put our family through, so I invited them to be here with me tonight. I, Juan Miguel Arredondo, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
of
San Marcos CISD School Board District 1
of San Marcos CISD School Board District 1
of the state of Texas
of the state of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank y'all for being here. All right, I'll see y'all later. Krista, thank you.
Next,
You want to announce what district?
District 3.
I, Mayra Mejia,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully
that I will faithfully
execute the duties
execute the duties
of the office of San Marcos CISD School Board District 3
of the office of San Marcos CISD School Board District 3
of the state of Texas
of the state of Texas
and will,
and will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
preserve,
preserve,
protect, and defend
protect, and defend
the constitutions and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of this state.
and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome to our new board member. Yes, let's do the picture. We're going to take a picture of the new board.
You tell us.
Y'all can go now if you want.
Andrew, you tell us how you want us. I think
You don't
we're
have to
gonna-
be here all night. Thank y'all so much. Are you okay being next to one another?
We're okay
No.
being okay. We're okay if we're wearing masks. If you want us to take off masks, then we need to leave the space.
Do you have your mask
2020, it's the only year we'll do this.
Teal.
You're gonna put on your pretty mask?
Innovative, man. They have homecoming masks now.
Can you see?
Yeah, you can see.
Are you in close enough? It's gonna cover up the.
I can step one side to the left. Good.
All right, ready? 1, 2. One, two.
For the memory books.
Okay, now we can get down to the business of the meeting. We'll start with our superintendent's report.
Is it okay if I take my mask? All right. All right. Madam President, members of the board, welcome. Welcome to the people who are in the audience. Just a little bit, I want to give a shout out to all the wonderful people. Last Friday, if you didn't know, we were under a boil water ban. And so the night before, our maintenance department and Andrew Fernandez over here, sprung to action. Andrew got 60 cases, if I'm right, 60 cases, a pallet full of water donated from HEB, who's always been a really good partner. And we had no glitch, like everything worked smoothly Friday. Our kids had water, and they were well taken care of. And so I want to shout out the team, the teachers. And we had, less than 24 hours notice to figure this out. And they just roll with the punches. Lunches weren't affected, and they just moved on like the professionals they are. So thank you to them. I also want to thank, and I don't know if I should, and I may be breaking the news, but I want to thank the Connection Church of San Marcos, Chance Ensley, who will be working with us later this week. He secured enough toys for all our pre-K, at least one toy for all our pre-K through fifth grade students. So we'll be, and they're the kids know them. They're those little collectible figures. They're those, they're not, yeah, they have a name, but I don't know. My son has a bunch of them, but the kids like them. And so we're grateful for their support of our kids. We also I just want to take a moment to thank our staff and our students, and hope that they stay home. They mask up. That's what I always do, right? They wash their hands and they stay safe. I know the inclination is to want to travel, but now maybe is not necessarily the best time. And so I hope that everybody just has time to decompress at home and comes back safely on Monday the 30th. And then I also want to thank the city of San Marcos. We are going on Wednesday at some point, or sometime this week. They graciously donated 192,000 masks. So we want to thank Rebecca Ibarra Ramirez and everybody who set that up. And we'll, just to put it in perspective, that's about 24 days of masks if everybody gets one every day. It's an enormous amount, but it takes a lot, and so we appreciate the city, and then earlier the county, who is working with us on some grants to get some more technology, just to have backups. And then finally, I just want to give an update. I know we talked about testing, and I know that some of y'all have asked questions. So TEA delivered the rapid testing kits to us today, and tomorrow we will start sending out permission slips to parents. So we, don't have one for every child, but if our athletics has been doing some testing for our athletes, this will be very similar. So all our campuses now, nurses will have the ability to do a 15-minute PCR rapid test, and it's pretty accurate. And so we'll start that up on Monday. And then Mr. Wozniak is working with Curative. They are up at Texas State, and then they have a location at Lucio Park. When we come back, they're going to be moving one of their locations to the outlet mall, and then we're working with them potentially to have the second location either here at the front of the high school or at the stadium. But they have to have a certain number of tests they need to do a day, so we're trying to figure that additional support for our families and our teachers and staff. And with that, Madam President, I'll turn it over to you. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. And everybody gets rest next week. Stay home, please, and just remain safe. It's on to y'all.
Next, we have the presentation by the auditor regarding our 2020 comprehensive financial report.
Good evening, trustees. Our audit was recently completed, and this evening we have Mr. Michael Del Toro here to present that to you, our 2020 annual financial report.
Thank you, Dr. Barton. Board, it's good to be here tonight. I've got some water here. I'm suffering from some allergies, so don't anyone get worried. I'm not COVID sick or anything. So. Can you all hear me okay? Great. I am here, as Mr. Barton mentioned, to present the June 30th, 2020 financial audit. I believe everyone had a draft. I will go through this very quickly, but if there's any questions or comments that want to be made as I go through this, please don't hesitate to interrupt. The audit went very smoothly, very easy. This is a number of years I've been involved with the district, and every year, not that we've ever had a difficult year, but every year gets easier and better. And with Denise, who's been around, I think in this role for maybe 3-4 years now, she's kind of taken on that role and is doing really very well in that position and keeping things rolling. And obviously with Mr. Barton overseeing that, everything went real smoothly. Do have a couple of minor comments that we'll get into at the end of the discussion, but they're not significant. None of the audit comments that we have were considered material or significant deficiencies, and so I do want to mention that there were comments, but they're not severe, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. On page 1 of the bound report is the independent auditor's report. It is what you hire us for. Basically says that we were hired to perform an audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, because you do obtain federal funds. And the purpose of that is to opine on whether the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And we do state that at the very top of page 2, the opinion paragraph. We say that based on our audit, we do find the financial statements as presented to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That's a clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance we can give on the financial statements, and very consistent with what we've gone through with the district over the years. On page 5, the management discussion and analysis. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but this is a verbal explanation of the fiscal year. There's some comparative information to last year. So if you want to revisit, kind of get a refresher on what I talked about or what happened during the fiscal year, this is an area to go to very quickly and get a high overview of the district's operations during the fiscal year. If we could turn to page 17, is the balance sheet for the governmental funds. The primary operating fund obviously is a general fund, and we present that first on this page. There's a couple of other funds that are presented. The debt service fund, that's where you're collecting tax revenues for debt service payments on the bonds that you've issued. And then the capital projects funds, as we issue bonds for projects, we put the money up in the capital projects funds. And so those met a threshold to be presented at this level. If they fall below, if they're just not material to the financial statements as a whole, they're lumped together, like this food service fund. It is a big fund, but it doesn't meet a threshold, as well as most of your special revenue funds. They will be lumped into that other governmental funds column, and they're presented in the back of the report, and we can look at that at a high overview as we move through the report. Very quickly, in the general fund, we do have a very healthy operating fund balance. That unassigned number, which is third or fourth from the bottom there, you got $42.6 million, almost $42.7 million. That's over 6 months of average operating expenditures of the district, and that's in the healthy range. Best practices for local governments, we look anywhere from 3 to 9 months, and you're in that 6 month range. So very healthy economic position for the district. The debt service fund, as I mentioned, we're collecting tax revenues to pay down debt. We have about $18 million in that fund, well above the amount we need to cover this coming year's debt service payments. I think our debt service payments are about $10 million for the upcoming fiscal year, and you got $18 million in there. So you got some money in there. I know we tapped into that for some bond refunding during this past year. So you might want to talk to your financial advisor and see if there's room to do that again. I know reducing your debt, as I talked to Mr. Barton during the audit, will help the district in its first ratings. I know that there's some points that you can get if you can lower that debt ratio. The Capital Projects Fund, as I mentioned, you've issued bonds in the past for some projects. So you have about $34 million left of unspent bonds at the end of the fiscal year, at June 30th. And then the other governmental funds, as I mentioned, we'll look at those in the very back of the report. Page 19 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and change in fund balance for the governmental funds. Again, the operating fund, main operating account is the general fund. And again, I'm not going to go through the numbers there, but we did add fund balance at the end of the year. You'll look, we'll look at the budget to actual. We were actually budgeted to take money out of fund balance, about $6.4 million. We were budgeting to take out of fund balance, and we actually added $3.2 million during the fiscal year. Debt service, again, those expenditures are to pay down debt. So you see the activities there are related to bond principal payments. And we did have 2 refundings, which we'll look at in a footnote in a little bit. We did save the district some money, which we'll talk about in the fund balance when we get into the notes to the financial statements. But we did have some refundings in that debt service column there. Overall, we added fund balance of just over $200,000. And then the Capital Projects Fund, we see a negative fund balance change there of $28 million. Again, that shouldn't be an alarm. We issued that money in the past. Those are the project expenses that we have, and that's what's going to happen in that fund. We're just slowly paying that down. Take a pause here. If we turn to page 25 begins the notes to the financial statements. They're going to give you a little bit more narrative on some of the numbers there. I'm only going to highlight a couple of them, but if you have any questions on any of them, please feel free to ask. On page 37 is the notes to the long-term obligations. And those first 2 paragraphs talk about the refundings that we had. We refunded our Series 2019 bonds during the year, as well as our Series, we refunded our Series 2012 and 2013 bonds. We saved the district roughly $10 million in savings and economic savings, where we discounted by a discount rate of $8 million. So that's a pretty significant amount with that refunding the 2 refundings that we had during the year. So good plan there to refund those bonds during the year. If we turn to page 52 and 53, this is the budget to actual, and again, I'm not going to go through these numbers in detail. I just want to highlight on page 53 what I mentioned earlier. We had budgeted $8.3 million of a to take out a fund balance. After we had amended the budget, we changed that to $6.1 million, but our actuals brought in $3.2 million of fund balance. So we had a positive swing of $9.3 million because we were gonna go in the hole, or at least take out a fund balance. We actually put money in. So just wanted to highlight that. And then if we could turn to page 85. Since this audit was done in accordance with governmental auditing standards, we are required to put this report in there. It basically says that we're required to look at the internal controls of the district as well as their compliance with laws and regulations. And if we find deficiencies in those controls, we're required to report that to the users of the financial statements. This report says we did that. We're obligated by our standards to do that, but we didn't find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Those are the highest levels of control concerns that come out of an audit. We did have one comment, though, related to compliance, which we'll look at in a little bit. On the next page, page 87, is the independent auditor's report on compliance for the major program. This is the single audit, the federal program. You obviously receive a number of federal awards. We're required to do a risk assessment over those awards and figure out which programs to audit. This year we audited the child nutrition program. We did not, through that audit, identify any questionable cost or significant control risks. We do have a comment related to the federal awards, though, that we'll talk about. It's a compliance finding, but not a significant compliance finding. So, page 89 is a summation of everything that the audit report contains. It talks at the very beginning there, in section A, the summary of the audit report. I mentioned that we had an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. We did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, nor compliance that was material to the financial statements. We did have a comment or two, but they're not material to the financials. So none of the comments we have are material to the financial statements. On the federal awards, we do not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, but we do have a comment related to federal awards. I want to stress again, as I mentioned, that it's not a material comment, but one that we do have to make mention of. So what are those comments I keep dancing around? Page 90 begins the first one. And this one's a self-reported comment. One of the things you obtain from the state funding are the allotments, state compensatory education, and there was a new one for early education this year. And we're required to spend a certain amount of those funds. And James, you may have to kind of help me kind of regurgitate this, but due to HB3, House Bill 3, there was some bumps in our compensatory education allotment, and early education was a new funding. The final numbers for HB3 were not known to the district at the time they prepared their budget. So they budgeted a certain amount for compensatory education. I'm not even sure if you budgeted for early education. I'm not even sure if you had any data available to budget for that at the time of the budget preparation. When the final numbers came out, when the allotment numbers came to the district, it was well after the budget preparation, they had doubled the compensatory education amount, line item that was being allotted to the district. And then there was a number for early education, which was not known to the district at the beginning of their budget process or through the finalization of the budget. Those numbers were so great that they could not allocate or amend their budget enough to meet the compliance requirement of spending those funds. I do have to say, I have a number of 630 year-end districts. They have this same comment. The numbers were just too great for them to overcome. So anyways, they have self-reported that. They identified that they did not meet the spending requirements. They told us. We were like, well, we got to put it in the report, but we also will put the explanation there. The agency is very good about letting districts catch up in future years. So it's a comment we made, but it's not a significant comment, in my opinion, to the district. Page 91 is another comment. This one's federal related. And this one really has to do with the changing dynamics during the COVID shutdowns and the personnel that were involved, as well as additional funding sources that were coming in. There were two new funding sources, CRF, Coronavirus Relief Funds, and ESSER money that were coming from the district to compensate the district for the additional expenses related to COVID and the ramifications of the COVID shutdowns. Those two are separate grant funding sources. And what the district eventually did was they had some expenses that they were allowable expenses that they could draw down from. They drew down from one grant for certain invoices, but then they turned around and drew down an amount for those same invoices that they had already drawn from a previous funding source. Wasn't a lot, it was like $7,000, but there should have been procedures in place to allow the district to know which funds they drew down for and which ones they shouldn't be drawn down multiple times. Obviously, it goes without saying we shouldn't be drawing for the same expenses from multiple sources. So, again, our comment there: beef up the processes. But we understand where that came from. Obviously, there was a lot of changing personnel, some in-house, some not in-house, and so some of the information got crossed. Something that in a collaborative environment that we normally work in, we probably would have recognized, but that wasn't the situation we were working on in April and May when these transactions were drawn down from. So again, not a significant comment. Less than $7,000 or just over $7,000 is not material to the district, but it is something we have to comment on in the audit report. And then the final one is on page 92, and this had to do with the district's completion of the I-9s for new employees. We did, through our testing of federal expenditures that are payroll related, we do look at the I-9s and whether we have those properly completed on file. I think there were 2 employees that we looked at out of 5 new employees that were hired in the child nutrition department that they had partially completed the I-9s, but they had not fully completed all the requirements that were necessary. The district was going through a self-audit in April of 2020, and they identified that these items had not been completed. So in some ways, they self-reported this comment to us as well. But we did have to make note that those weren't done. I think they have to be done within 7 days, or I'm not sure. James, do you remember? Yeah. So on page 91 is just a comment from last year that we have to follow up on. It had to do with purchase order approvals within the federal program. We're happy to report that this was cleared. We did not have a similar comment, but we do have to add that comment in there with the status update in there for the feds. And with that, I will conclude and take any questions that you have.
Ms. Halsey?
Thanks. So what accounts for the swing from the projected fund balance at the deficit of 6.4 to the actual additional $3.2 million?
I believe pages 52 and 53 are most responsive to you. And while returning balance to the general fund is always better than removing money from the general fund, in this situation, we have to tell you there was just not the opportunity to make the expenditures that we had planned to. So if you look in the expenditures section about midway down on page 52, you can see by function, be it instruction where our teacher salaries are, right below that instructional resources, curriculum staff development. You can imagine what we had set aside for last June. That didn't happen. All the way down by support services, even down into our plant maintenance, the bills we didn't pay. All total, if you total that up, it's $6 million. So we did not have the opportunity to expend what we had expected to. And again, it's a blessing to bring money back to the district so that you can make some decisions with it, but it was not in the budget. We had expected to spend that money for our programs. If you take that away from the almost 3.3 million, 3.289, that's a deficit of just over 2 million, which we had expected, although the budget that you were asked to pass was $8.3 million in deficit. And the only other factor I'd ask you to keep in mind is we had to give the state $1.5 million right at the end of the fiscal year for CARES money. So we were on track to bring you a deficit budget of $1.2 million at the end. We just did not have the opportunity to expend it as we had budgeted because students were not in the facilities.
But, so then how does that mesh out with the additional increased compensatory spending and the early childhood funds that were not spent? I mean, it sounded like that ended up being twice as much as what we had
It's more about
projected it would be.
targets. So when the state gives us money, they set a target for that spending. So for example, 55% for state compensatory education, which is allocated to us based on the percentage of students of economic need. So in the $8.3 million budget deficit, that budget that you passed, there was $4 million in state comp ed spending. So we had planned to spend 55% of that. When HB3 passed, we got $9.5 million. And so we had to find additional spending that met those requirements. That's a little bit more without bringing in additional costs to the district because we were still in a budget deficit. We fell just shy of that. And then the other one we missed was early education because it simply did not exist in the $8.3 million deficit budget that you passed. That was before HB3. And so throughout the year, we reformatted the budget and brought it back into alignment. We missed it by just a couple $100,000. And what the state does is they give you 3 years to average out any shortfall. So in the budget that we presented you in June, we're hitting every single target in our budgeting, and we have plans to overspend appropriately to make up that shortfall over the next 2 years. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
I think so, but so we're going to make up the shortfall, but then, I mean, we can't make up the shortfall with recurring costs. Because
Correct.
Right. So we have to make up the shortfall with one-time expenses until we get.
Sometimes. I'll give you a really great example. There are certain positions that we have that qualify for state comp ed expenditures. And a great one is our social emotional counselors. And so they were not budgeted from that fund at the beginning of the last school year. But as we realized we were going to be in that shortfall at the beginning of the school year, we started going through our staffing and looking for the positions that met those requirements so that we could label them appropriately and help meet the spending threshold. That's a major one, several positions throughout our district, several $100,000. We did that for all of our campuses, and again, that's not finding new expenditures, and that's not taking on new ongoing costs, even though that is an ongoing cost.
Okay.
That's one of the processes that we went through. I don't want to say it's simple. It's complex, but once you start the systems going correctly, things get back into alignment.
But then now that we know what HB3 is going to result in for us, we should be much more accurate in our budget projections this coming cycle, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Our systems are built appropriately in this budget. We are exceeding every required expenditure in this budget. Our challenge is we've got 2 years to make up that shortfall. And so we're looking at the extra technology that we've had to buy to ramp up this school year. That qualifies. And so we're able to apply that to that shortfall. And again, it's an ongoing process of shoring up that it is a deficiency. It's a weakness that we shouldn't have had, but our budget was not built for HB3, and it was passed right at or right before HB3. And so it's just something we've had to get back into alignment.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. Mr. Barton, I have a couple of questions on a few of the line items, or I guess functions. So one of the items is school leadership, which is budgeted at a little bit over $5 million, and the final budget was $112,000. What is the? I'm assuming our leadership got paid this past fiscal year. So what is the variance of those funds?
That's any shortfall in salaries. Obviously, I believe there's a small bit of professional development set aside there. Our school leaders don't leave campus that much. But believe it or not, those salaries add up with benefits. If there's any principal or assistant principal that is out for a month or two in between that position being filled, it adds up over time. And I'll tell you, if you go up to instruction on line 11, that 1.8 million, that's teacher salaries. And just over half of it is salaries. The other half is expenditures for budgets for instruction. So it is almost always people when you get definitely to 7 figures.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hard work.
Thank you.
continue with our academic update.
Good evening, board members. I'm Mike Doyle, Federal Programs and CT Director. For the first portion of this presentation, I'll address our district improvement plans and campus improvement plans. So the purpose of the district improvement plan and also campus improvement plans is to align goals, objectives, strategies, and actions which lead to high levels of performance for all students and student groups to close achievement gaps and to support systematic change. All of our improvement plans are in line with federal regulation, and they all revolve around these 4 bullet points. They're based on the district's need assessment, and when you're talking campus improvement plan, same thing, but it's campus need. They're data-driven. They're aligned with the district core commitments, and which are also the goals that you will see in those plans. And they're aligned with federal and state requirements as well. Next. So within that improvement plan, you'll see a variety of needs that need to be within those plans set forth by federal regulation. These are a vision and mission statement, a needs assessment, which is comprehensive in nature, which each campus does their own individual needs assessment, which drives their campus improvement plan. As a district, we do our own district needs assessment as well, and again, it drives our needs assessment. Title I elements at the district level, at the district improvement plan, and sometimes at a within our high school, you'll see the Perkins elements that revolves around the Perkins grant and CTE support. CTE support and Perkins doesn't lend itself to elementary school. You also see you will see goals, the performance objectives and strategies, SEL strategies, DAEP strategies, parent family engagement, dropout prevention strategies, state compensatory education strategies, staff development, staff recruitment, hiring and retention, and ongoing evaluation process. So what you also have is our CIP and DIP executive summaries that are a shortened breakdown of the campus improvement plan and district improvement plan, which holds the mission and vision statement, the demographics, the student achievement summary, the curriculum instruction, and also the summary of goals. And these are reflective also with the needs assessment from each CIP and DIP.
Good evening, Board. I'm Monica Ruiz-Mills, Deputy Superintendent. I'm going to review the targeted improvement plans. While no ratings were issued for 2020, any campus that received an overall D or F rating in 2019 or received a D in a domain will remain on a targeted improvement plan. The targeted improvement plan is very much similar to the campus improvement plans, where they take the data and the needs assessments that are conducted by the campus, and they set metrics and plans of action throughout the 90-day cycles. This is just an overview of what we showed you last year, where campus leaders worked with their campus improvement teams and their community to record the gaps and identify any of the prioritized actions needed to bridge the gaps, aligning everything to their vision and goals that are in the campus improvement plans. Next slide. So we were given the flexibility for the option 2 delayed process submission, As you can see up on the screen, December the 18th is when our targeted improvement plans will be submitted, pending board approval on December the 17th. However, at the December board meeting, we will review our beginning of year map screener data for you, like we did last year, as if we were reviewing for cycle 1, just so you will have an overview of where we are at this point in time in the school year. Then January 4th through February the 18th, we will have our TIP submission conferences. That's where we review our TIP plans. We look at the metrics that we have in place to see if we're going to hit those targets that are projected. And then March the 5th is when we have our next progress to submission. Next slide. So the following campuses are continuing on a targeted improvement plan for this year. Again, this is based off of the 2019 STAR data. We had Travis, which was identified as underperforming in all 3 domains off of the 2019 STAR. And then we had Goodnight and Miller, which was identified as a comprehensive campus support because of their domain 3 rating, which led them to an overall D rating. All 3, Travis, Goodnight, and Miller, will submit their targeted improvement plans. They come to Mr. Cardona and myself, and then we submit them to the Texas Education Agency. We also receive additional support from Region 13 for professional development and any school improvement feedback. The remaining 4 campuses, Bowie, De Zavala, Hernandez, and Mendez, received an overall C rating but did receive a D in a domain. Therefore, they also align their targeted improvement plans to their campus improvement plan, and we monitor those as well at the local level. Theirs are not submitted, but in the event of an audit, we would have that documentation as needed. Next slide. So our school improvement efforts center around the effective school framework model. Each tip has noted which prioritized levers and actions will be utilized in the plan. For consistency, we've identified prioritized lever 5, which focuses on effective instruction, along with some district commitments to help ensure that we're supporting effective instruction for the students, but also supporting the teachers to ensure rigorous learning experiences. We've sent our leaders, and they've also had training with their staff, and we continue to send them to effective school framework training, which is now virtual from Region 13. Next slide. Under the prioritized lever are essential actions, and we focus on 5.1 and 5.3. 5.1 is objective-driven daily lesson plans with formative assessments. So as teachers develop their daily lesson plans, our campus instructional leaders provide feedback on the lessons plans. They also ensure that we have our assessments aligned to the scope and sequence, and they're also looking to see if the differentiated paths of instruction are aligned to meet the needs of our students within our special programs. Data-driven instruction is 5.3. And there what we do is we take the data, as I mentioned earlier, from the beginning of year map screener, and then from our daily common assessments and our formative assessments to determine where we need to go back and focus on the reteaching for our students in order to bridge the gap and close in on those learning delays that we have experienced during this time. So our next steps, our campus teams are going to continue to discuss the plans with their campus improvement team, with their faculty, and with their community for the next month. They're soliciting additional feedback on what they can add to the plan as well. And then any revisions will be inputted and then brought to you at the December meeting for final approval. We do have these drafts on our website for the community and for you to review review as needed. But again, it's just a continuation of what we had approved this past year. Thank you.
Good evening, School Board, Mr. Superintendent. I'm excited.
Before we move on from, I didn't realize that Ms. Dre was not presenting within the improvement plans. I just have a couple of questions, maybe before we go to the next section. Sure. So I note that a lot of the targets, like campuses would commit to 5% gains in certain testing areas. Is that a 5% gain over a 2-year period? We don't have a reference marker for last year, so are we going to compare the tested performance in the 18-19 year to the tested performance in the 2021 year, and that's a 5-point gain, for instance, over those 2 years?
Right, and so we'll go back and we're going to align it to the board goals that were set back in June. And so I want to say it was between 3 and 5% gains using the 2019 data as the base. And then when we present the data, because we have until November 30th to complete our beginning of year map screener, when we bring that to you, we may need to make some minor adjustments depending on what we're doing. What we're trying to do right now is do it by cohort, right? So if I'm an 8th grader, how did I perform on the map screener this time last year as a 7th grader? And then we're going to also do it by grade. And then to get really ambitious, we're going to try to select a couple of students and do an historical progression so we can see how they mapped out and then track it from there.
So from the board goals that filter down, you know, in my mind, if the target was a 3 to 5% gain, that's an annualized basis. So I would think if we're comparing over 2 years, it would be 6 to 10, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Did you have other questions, Mr. McLaughlin?
No.
Anyone else have questions for Dr. Rees-Mills?
I do, sorry.
Halsey?
So with this year's cohort of 8th graders, have we continued doing predominantly algebra in the 8th grade, even though through the COVID?
Yes.
Just wanted to confirm that. Thanks.
I'm going to do a plug for tutor.com. If any student needs assistance, we have tutor.com.
Ms. Dre?
Okay. All right, so I am excited to bring to you some news around some things that have been going on with innovative programs and some opportunities that we have to continue to build out some of the work that we've been taking part in for the last 5 years or so. So first, I want to frame this presentation with some of the why behind why school innovation and redesign is important. You'll see there are pictures of classrooms from the 1900s through the 2000s. And if we were in a workshop setting, I'd ask you to tell me what you notice that you see in common among those pictures and maybe some differences. But I think it's fair to say that school has remained largely the same since before the 1900s, actually. And then go ahead, next slide. Our current reality, it does look different. So these are 2 of our classrooms. And while it does look different, we are in a situation where the instructional model, the way that we deliver instruction, hasn't shifted. And partly because we are not equipped to make that shift unless we make take intentional steps to shift those practices and systems. So what we know is that we're in a situation where we're not equipped to equitably meet student needs. Technology is something that is no longer an option, not that it necessarily was before, but it most certainly is not now. And we also know that for change to happen that's sustainable and meaningful, often disruptive innovation is needed to bring that change. What we're good at in education is adding new programs. One thing we're not great at is getting away from some of the things that we've done because we've always done them that way. And so innovation is completely redesigning the way we do school, right? Okay. So with that, we have a couple of new programs I'm going to share with you and a quick review of some of the things that we have in place and that we've had in place for several years now. Part of this work included formalizing an Office of Innovation. To be clear, we haven't added staff with local funding. If we had, you'd know about it already. We have reorganized within TLA to form a cross-functional team with myself and the Educational Technology Department. And our purpose is to equip and inspire reshaping and reimagining and redesigning the way we do school, infusing technology versus integrating or adding on, engaging in high-level research, design practices, prototyping and iterating, and that's something that our grants facilitate our ability to do that type of thing. Grants provide funding for us to put time and effort into that work. And it also helps us align the work to district priorities and to scale the work. All right, so this is not my drawing, but it is the drawing of an organization, some of you probably recognize it, named Transcend Education. We've been working with them since 2016 when we first started redesign at Bowie Elementary. One thing that I'd like to point out is that there's a line called probable there, and we could continue along that line like we've done since the beginning of public education in America, and we would know what the outcomes would be because we would continue to get what we're getting now. Go ahead and click. So there is a pivot point, and right now in this moment in time, not just because of COVID, but because of our desire as an organization to truly prepare students to be future ready, we have an opportunity to leverage this moment in time and change directions, and go ahead and click, and move towards desired aims and outcomes. Okay, so this is just a quick overview of some of the current programs we have in place right now. I mentioned Bowie Elementary, who started redesigning for personalized learning in 2016. We have the STOP grant, which is still in place, and that grant is focused on social emotional learning and has allowed us to create a department of social emotional learning, including staffing and building out those programs. We have other grants also at Bowie and Rodriguez that have helped us continue the work of personalized learning. You know, Rodriguez was designed specifically to facilitate personalized learning. And we also have a grant from We Teach CS in partnership with the KLE Foundation, one of our other private funders, to help us build out a pre-K through 12 computer science pathway. So we're in our second year. Last year was a planning year. This is our first year of implementation fully. And those campuses include De Zavala, Goodnight, and the high school. Eventually, it will also include pre-K. All of these things work together to help us move towards that future readiness. Okay, go ahead. And the two new grant programs that also align to this work are the ADSY and School Action Fund. ADSY, I'll give you more information about that in a moment, is about adding days to our school year. And that grant is a planning grant. It's in place at Mendez and Travis. The other grant is also a planning grant, the School Action Fund, and it is a grant focused on redesigning for blended learning. It's in place at Travis, Goodnight, and Miller. Travis has their hands full, but I'm going to show you how these two work together, and they're both TEA grants. Okay. So you can go ahead and click. I already said that part. All right. Okay, the things that they have in common are the stakeholder-driven design. They're both enrichment and SEL focused. Future-ready learning is a main priority. Improve student and teacher experiences, reimagining school schedules, and overall improving student learning outcomes. Also, one thing I didn't put up there, which I should have, both grants require a specific and targeted alignment to Effective Schools Framework. And as we work through the strategic planning process, which I'm going to describe to you in just a moment, you'll see that we've also aligned the work to core commitments and our board goals. Okay. The things that are different between the two grants. ADSY specifically has us redesign our instructional calendar for 210 instructional days. So TEA is encouraging strongly all districts to consider getting to at least a minimum of 180 school days, and hoping for the potential that districts will consider expanding all the way to 210. So the planning grant we're in now is an opportunity for us to build out, have support to build out a strategic plan that helps us consider all of the many intricacies that are involved in changing a school calendar. School Action Fund is focused on redesigning school with blended learning and high dosage tutoring. So both of these grants are going to help us move from a crisis response in teaching and learning to a blended learning model that, when done well, will help us meet the needs of every student, not just now, but also when we're pandemic free. So, okay, I'm going to share more with you about ADSY because of the number of intricacies involved. So the planning grant provides financial and technical support to help us build out the 210-day calendar. It includes systematically gathering input from the entire San Marcos learning community and business partners and other community members as well. The purpose of expanding the instructional days is to provide more holistic and enriching teaching and learning experiences while minimizing learning loss from time out of school. So, and that includes not just quarantine time, but also summer. And I'm sure you've heard the term before, summer slide. Commissioner Morath spoke at the ADSY kickoff, and he commented that the data has been telling us for 50 years that significant learning loss occurs from time out of school, requiring a recovery period at the beginning of each new school year. So in a scope and sequence, a traditional calendar scope and sequence, you'll see that there is a built-in a review period. By expanding our school year to 210 days at these two schools, it will allow us to pilot eliminating those extended periods away from school, and hopefully we'll do what the research is saying that it should, and what other districts in other places have experienced, that they're able to continue the learning versus having to go back and review and have students lose some of their learning. See, the ADSY planning, the grant funds are also fully supporting a grant planning manager. This is, we're calling him a coordinator of school redesign. His name is Blaine Carpenter. He's fully supported by the grant, and so this year he has joined our Office of Innovation team. He is working to align and organize all of the vast amounts of stakeholder engagements, holding meetings with every department in the district, teachers, parents, students, a plethora of engagements, and collecting all of the data to help inform our strategic plan. The grant is also giving us an opportunity to advance our work towards innovating school, and so it's helping us move along at the other schools where we've already got innovative programs in place. Okay. Okay, so a couple of slides from TEA to show you how ADSY works. So ADSY formula funding is available to any school district that wants to expand their school year beyond 180 days. Up to 210, that's the maximum that they'll allow half-day formula funding, and currently that's only available for grades pre-K through 5. Okay. Go ahead. So that funding is separate from the grant funding. The grant funding is to provide us the opportunity to put time and effort into the strategic planning. We could have simply made a decision as a district to expand our school year, and we wouldn't have needed the grant to do so. But I would argue that, you know, the strategic planning is critical, and so the grant's going to help us do that well. Okay, so the priorities of the grant are determined by TEA. But we get to design the school experience, the daily schedule, a calendar to deliver a revised, reimagined instructional model, and for overall better school experience for teachers, families, and students. The focus is to ensure we have deeper mastery-focused learning, more enrichment, like more art, music, movement, technology. This allows learners to engage in creativity and problem solving, and more frequent and infused social emotional learning for whole child support. Okay, here's an example of how the daily schedule might shift to allow for 210 school days. So we would slightly adjust the daily academic minutes by reducing them minimally on a daily basis, and then adding that instructional time back into the calendar across those additional 30 days. That gives us the opportunity to add more SEL experiences for students, more unstructured play, more movement activities, more enrichment, and additional specials, for example. All of that together will help us increase the depth and scope of the academic instructional time across a longer period of time, which helps improve knowledge and skill retention and helps eliminate learning loss. This is a high-level overview of the timeline. So currently and ongoing is assessing and improving, looking to see how we can improve the conditions for innovation. Listening and learning, that's stakeholder engagement. Drafting our plans and sharing them with you, and working through a series of approvals. Towards February, we will begin iterating after we've gotten some feedback from TEA and from you as well. And we would then begin preparing for implementation. So it's difficult to see in those boxes, those little diamonds below, but those are approval dates. So, or due dates that we have. For instance, December 1st, we'll be submitting a very draft plan to TEA for preliminary approval to allow us to continue the work. I will bring that back to you after we've integrated some more stakeholder feedback and input into the plan for approval in January. And then we'll continue to work, revise, continue to add more stakeholder input, and then we'll bring it back to you in April for final approval. Okay, so far this fall, what we've done is dug deep into the school level planning and planning out engagement for stakeholders, from teachers through to parents and students, like I mentioned before. We've also begun working on a new master calendar to propose. The driving questions for this work include things like, what ways are we or will we invite stakeholders? Who will we invite? What are the stakeholder needs? What are the priorities, desired experiences? What strategies will help contribute to building that, the desired experiences? What are the changes we'll make to the master schedule? And what changes will we make to the annual calendar? So right now we have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. That's because we're being extremely intentional about engaging our stakeholders in this work. So stakeholder-driven redesign is not about us coming up with a plan and then selling it to our stakeholders. It's about truly engaging in that work together for shared leadership. So far we have held 3 community learning exchanges with Travis and Mendez teachers. Approximately 50 people attended those. We have held preliminary draft calendar design workshops. Teacher surveys are being developed now. We'll bring some of those results to you in December. We've worked with the finance department for some preliminary modeling, some work sessions and conversations about broad implications and some detailed implications like teacher pay, accessing the ADSY formula funding, how we can utilize other supplemental fund sources to help, for instance, money that we would normally use at Travis and Mendez for summer school. So it's taking a look at how we currently use funds, finding efficiencies, and aligning those to our priorities. We've met with transportation, and those meetings will continue. Parent liaisons have shared their vast amount of knowledge and connections across the community to help us know who we need to speak with and help set those meetings up. We've begun our conversations with human resources to identify and discuss all of the conditions and implications for adding days and problem solving those. We're inviting and holding ongoing conversations, and we are participating with TEA on a monthly basis in work sessions, as well as right now about weekly office hours held by TEA, where they're bringing in experts from other places that across the country that have already done some of this work to help us understand all of the things that we need to critically examine. Okay. So our strategic plan includes, of course, needs assessment, looking at our vision, making sure that the work is completely aligned to Mr. Cardona and to you, school board, as well as to, of course, the needs of our students. We're looking at the enabling conditions and that preliminary annual calendar. Okay. What I'll be bringing to you in January is part 1 of the TEA strategic plan. That includes more detail than what I just shared with you. That was a high-level overview. But what you'll see in January is some data and continuous improvement processes that will outline how are we going to measure and monitor the work, how are we going to make sure it's successful, those kinds of things, management and communication, what are the academics and enrichment programs going to look like, how are we going to use that additional teacher planning time. All of those things have to be very intentionally designed for TEA to make their final approval of our plan. Of course, the budget and operations, making sure that what we design is sustainable, and how are we going to recruit students and manage student attendance, and that also includes teachers. How are we going to make sure that the teachers who want to work for those additional days and have the skills that we need to be able to do this. Okay. So that part comes to you in January for your preliminary approval. Then we'll revise after we've gotten feedback from all of you, from TEA, and more feedback from our stakeholders, and we'll build out part 2, which is all of that at a high level, and then some. That includes risk management, additional details in the budgets, communications plan, which we're actually finalizing right now, staffing plans, all of those things built out at a high level. Also professional learning. Okay. So we'll be asking you for approvals, like I said, in January. And one additional thing, previously TEA only allowed for one option to change your start date before that last Monday in August. Now TEA allows a second option called the year-round district designation. It's a simple approval from you, and it allows any one of our schools to determine, of course, after going through all this planning, if they want to start their school year earlier than that first Monday in August. It doesn't have all of the other strings attached to it like District of Innovation. So once we have, if we have your approval to do that, we would then submit that to TEA along with our strategic plan. And then we simply let our regional PEAMS coordinator know that we're shifting to 2 of our schools to a year-round calendar. And then TEA takes all of that stuff and approves it, hopefully. And then finally, at the end of all of this, we would be primed to apply for continuation funding if TEA releases it. They say they're going to, but we're going to act like we're not sure because you never know. So, but that potential is there for both grants. But right now, the ADSY continued funding would help us with that implementation, help us iterate, refine that plan as we pilot it, and then make determination about whether or not we want to continue with a full 30 additional days or 210 days, or if we want to scale that back to some level, whatever the case is.
Mr. McLaughlin, you had a question?
Yes, and comment. Well, mainly just don't want my silence to be interpreted as support. I am concerned about going to 210 instructional days. I think the board was not supportive of becoming a District of Innovation when a schedule modification was the main purpose of that change. And so we're on that history. I think, we need to be fairly engaged before this train gets too far down the tracks. I'm not convinced that this will be well received by the school communities, and I'm worried that children zoned to those 2 schools won't really have an option unless they have private transport to go to a different school. I'm concerned about the being out of sync with the middle school and high school where their siblings may attend or their parents might teach. And I'm not sold that while what you pitched were things I support, like additional social emotional learning, more art, I'm all for that stuff. I don't see why we have to have more days in order to do that. So I just wanted to voice those concerns because I know this is coming back to us. I know we're not voting on it tonight, so I'm not voting now, but just wanted to make sure that was clear. I would need to know why. And I think the summer slide, as you mentioned, focuses too much on measurables. Kids learn a lot in the summer on things you don't measure, and that's real valuable as they grow up. I remember more from my summers than my school years probably when I was a kid, and I think that's true for a lot. So that's all I got.
Mr. Redondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. Similarly to Mr. McLaughlin, I don't want my silence to make you believe that I do not support this plan. So explicitly stating that I am very interested in the ongoing community conversations that are happening with stakeholders. And I know similarly that people might have an abrasive response to this because it is very different from the traditional model of public schooling that I received, that my parents received, that my grandparents received in the ISD. So I get that. Additionally, on the, what do children do during the summers? As a child of working class parents, I stayed at home during the summers. I was lucky to participate in the Summer Fun program, which has dwindled in participants over the years from what it was, I know, when I was a child or even my siblings. So all of that to say, I think there is a significant number of students in our community who don't have enrichment opportunities or opportunities to learn and go to museums and go to the park with their family and things that other families in San Marcos do have. So acknowledging that difference and that disparity and that inequity, I am interested in what this might look like in specific schools in the ISD, some of our most at-risk campuses and populations for sure. Similarly to Mr. McLaughlin's concern, as this conversation takes place, I would like to see hopefully feeder patterns of schools when it goes to a middle school, similarly, whether that's Miller or Goodnight. Explore extended learning opportunities as well, because I will acknowledge that, if my older sibling who I might look up to has the summers off and I don't, that might be, something that becomes impactful. And I know that's anecdotal, but it still matters. So all that to say, very exciting, and I look forward to what the community has to say about these changes in learning opportunities. So thank you, Mr. Ray.
The schools that are workshops seem to be innovative. Are they because they're the ones that are the extra time and would benefit from that? Is that
Yes, they are our highest need schools.
I'm wondering why we don't include more of our students or more of our schools. Is that too difficult to do? Make the change?
None.
Are you
Well,
waiting for a survey? I don't know. Asking.
well, the reason why we're going at it this way is to make sure that we design it really well. We feel like this is the kind of opportunity that we don't want to not take very seriously and plan very carefully for. So we're treating it like an intensive, well-designed pilot, and I have a strong feeling that if other schools wanted to take on this type of work, we wouldn't say no to that. Of course, if they're, the parents want to do that.
What if others, what I foresee is that this is going to be a very successful program and that other parents would want their students to go there. So would we add schools or would we transfer students to other schools? I don't know.
I think, yeah, possibly a combination of both. I suppose it depends on what, the overall community response looks like. And so as we prepare our surveys and begin gathering that feedback, that'll help us know, like, how big are we looking at right now. And of course, included in all of that strategic planning is looking at transfer policies, not only for students, but for teachers as well, looking at transportation. What does that mean for, families that really rely on district transportation? So we don't want to close the door on anything. We're using a design thinking approach and shared leadership to go about the problem solving instead of making assumptions about what we can and cannot do.
Halsey? I'm sorry, did you have a follow-up question?
Oh, thank you. What about schools in this area? Do you know, from Austin to San Antonio, we're being called an innovation corridor. So this fits right in, and I'm thinking only of our school district. But do you know of any of the other schools in the area that are doing this?
Currently, I know that Austin has a different start date, but they also don't necessarily have the 210 days. Spring ISD is engaged in this work. There are 11 districts that have the grant along with us. So it's such a new program that there aren't very many people in Texas doing it. There are people that changed, their calendar, but not necessarily built out a full 210 days. So we're kind of all in this together, trying to figure it all out. But we've got that, we consider ourselves a professional learning community together. So,
Ms. Halsey?
Thanks. So I think this is an exciting idea, especially if it allows us to offer more choices for students and families, which I think is great. I'm interested if you could clarify the funding, because you said it was a half-day funding mechanism, and so I'm just wondering what that means, if that's like the old early childhood model where the state pays for half of the day expenses and then locally we pay for the other half day, or what that means.
That's a really great question. And I would defer to Mr. Barton to give you more details on that. Yeah.
That's exactly what it means. They're going to pay for half of the average daily attendance on those school days. And so we've started the preliminary, trying to project what the enrollment might be and the average daily attendance and what that would bring to the district. We won't make up the full difference. We'll have to with our budget and find efficiencies elsewhere. And the planning grant for the first 2 years, if it goes into implementation, will help close a majority of that gap, is our best projection right now.
Thanks.
Ms. Hanson?
I'm curious about when you start the meetings with all the different stakeholder groups. Could you just send us an email with proposed and how we could just join in if we wanted to?
Absolutely.
That's okay?
Of course.
I'm curious to see the reaction and the ideas that come up.
Yeah, me too. Often our stakeholders come up with much more creative ideas than we do.
I've
So,
often thought, rather than have all summer off, having 6 weeks, 9 weeks, and then 2 weeks off, about a week, where the students that needed to could come in for tutoring and then doing it again,
yep.
instead of that whole summertime. I know that's hard for parents that work, having the whole summer trying to cover, and not leaving your children alone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll take the calendar to DEIC. The two proposed that we've created so far are very draft calendars to our DEIC committee on Tuesday. So they'll have an opportunity to see that while we also begin working on the regular district calendar.
This program is different from the year-round school, though, because this is not as many days, right?
It's more days.
It's more days than the year-round school? Okay. And how would this be different from our summer school that we usually have for those students that need to go to summer school?
So instead of focusing on remediation for the STAR exam, it's taking our scope and sequence, shifting it and making it the instruction deeper. And as part of that redesign, it's also about changing the instructional model as a whole, not just doing what we've always done spread out over more time, but changing the way we do instruction completely. So it's a completely redesigned school model, so it won't look like our traditional summer schools.
And what are the numbers in the traditional summer school do we have?
Number of days?
No.
Oh,
students.
number of students. Oh, that's a great question. Gosh, just in elementary alone, or last summer, we had about 600 elementary students participate virtually.
And this was for a full day? Or it's a half day?
It was half day.
And this program is also for a full day?
So there's flexibility within, TEA allows us to implement half days if that's what the stakeholders ask for. It has to be a minimum of 3 hours. So there are a lot of flexibilities within this and lots of details. And so as we go through that stakeholder redesign, we dig into all of those different options. Yeah.
Ms. Cantu.
Mr. Arredondo?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Cantu. My last final statement is when we talk about these stakeholder meetings, obviously this is an elongated process. If we're talking to fourth grade parents, their child is obviously probably going to be exited out of that campus by the time these changes might possibly be implemented. So I don't know, what that looks like in regards to trying to solicit input from folks who, have younger children who are not of school age, but who plan on enrolling their children in the ISD, so that we can get a perspective from folks whose children would actually be in the program, because obviously there's like a timing delay, right, between a second grader at Travis now and this being available to them later. So that'd be my last comment, is just being intentional of trying to solicit input from future ISD families as well.
Great,
Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin?
So, as you answered more questions, I heard more. So, would this be every grade across the campus? So, you'd have a kindergartner there for 210 days, as well as a fifth grader?
Yep.
Is this something that met the cabinet and district leadership's goals, or was it a grant out there that we got that we're making fit into the grant system, Mr. Cardona?
It was trying to innovate and find more time for kids to be in school at those two particular schools that met a need. So they qualified for those. I mean, the reality is we know what the data is. You kind of allude to that when you talk about third grade reading scores, and so we're trying to address that using this for those two campuses. And we have typically 600 kids, but I would probably, I need to look back historically. Travis and Mendez tend to send, more kids to summer school, so we were looking at a way to make summer school fun. Those field trips you talk about and experiences, it's not all built into the day. It's sending the kids out to do different modes of teaching and learning.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Mr. Redondo?
Sorry, one more. So as we, look at campus capacity, and I think Ms. Halsey referenced it, and I know the ISD was very involved with the charter school process at the state level, and as we know that those entities are constantly going to be trying to open up campuses in our ISD community and even the county, I agree with Ms. Halsey about being more of a district of choice and even campuses of choice, and offering variability to ISD families and stakeholders and so on and so forth, so that they don't choose outside instructional models from the ISD, and to stay competitive. So again, as we have all those conversations, and as we know, the landscape of public education is constantly changing, I welcome the opportunity to have conversations about being more innovative and offering something very non-traditional that might otherwise draw families outside of the ISD trying to find that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Ms.
I just
Halsey?
want to comment on that, I think this is a great idea. I'm interested to see how it works out, but I'm generally all for anything that we can do across the district to make school more fun, right? Like, school should be a fun thing, and the idea that we have to work toward that, like, I would like to just be there, so.
Learning can be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
whether
should
you're
be.
in person
It
or
is
online,
fun.
like, right? I mean, we should be able to adapt to that challenge, so I appreciate those efforts.
Thank you. That's the purpose of our Office of Innovation as well, to help us scale this kind of work.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Construction update. Gonna zoom in.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Hello?
Okay. Andrew, if you could put the presentation up, please. Board President Cantu, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Cardona. Good evening. This is Bernie Sandoval again. I will be providing you a 2017 bond construction update.
I think he's on.
He's on, but his mic's not.
Are you able to hear me?
Now we can hear him.
Okay. You can't hear me. I apologize. Okay. So Board President Cantu, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Cardona, good evening. This is Bernie Sandoval. I'm going to be providing you a 2017 bond construction update. We're going to start by looking at the budget. Overall savings is still in line with last month. We're close to finalizing a couple of projects that we'll be bringing to the board over the next 30, 45 days. We're just waiting on closing documents from the contractors, final pay apps. I don't see a lot of movement on that savings. It pretty much going to be in line through at least through the next 30, 60 days. Let's look specifically at Miller Middle School campus. As I was putting this presentation together, I was thinking over the last 5 to 6 months when I've been up here and I've been talking to y'all about Area F and Area D and probably overwhelming. So what I thought I would do this month, if you go to the next slide, Andrew, is show you a layout in an effort to, number one, give you a better picture of what I'm making reference to when I'm talking about different areas, and then also give you a visual on the end project, the school layout. So that right there is Miller Middle School. And phase 2, which has been completed, was the remodeling of the 3 wings, which is on top of the page. And then into those areas coming off the wings, some science labs, ACL. The next phase, if you go to the next slide, Andrew, is Area D. And if you're looking at the school from Foxtel, this would be directly all the way to the right. So this is going to be the first floor, phase 2. If you see that hallway that's coming just under Area D, you'll see that hallway. That's, just to give you a frame of reference, that's hallway for the 6th grade. So now that's coming into some science labs that'll be redone. And then this is really going to be where our admin is. At the very bottom right of this diagram, you'll see the entrance or the vestibule into the reception area, and then some administrative offices. And if you go to the next page, you'll see floor 2. And of course, you see classrooms, see some counselors' offices. The library, if you see at the very bottom, is actually going to be a split level. And you'll see it in conjunction with Area F, which is going to be the new band hall. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you a picture of that. So this is Area F. So if you look at the existing cafeteria, the stage, we also have a brand new orchestra room, a theater room, a band hall, choir, some offices. And this is all under phase 3, which will be done, phase 2, which is currently being worked on with an April end date. That corridor right there, and I'm going to make reference to it in a second, but that corridor between the band hall and the orchestra theater, I'm going to, like I said, I'll make reference to that here in a second, but just keep your memory on that. So this next slide is what I've been bringing to y'all every month. This sort of, like I said, it shows the items that were completed, scheduled for the next 30 days. And hopefully those layouts that I showed you put all this in perspective. Once again, Area D, a lot of activity there. That's the new admin. And then Area F, the new band hall. And when I show you the pictures, you'll see that a lot of work is going to start inside once we close up the walls. Regarding the schedule, phase 2 completion, we've done that. We're working on phase 1 completion of April 2nd. Last month, we talked about trying to work ahead, and we have an opportunity. And I mentioned that last month that we had to temporarily relocate the band hall into the library. And the reason for that is the fire marshal would not grant a TCO, or a temporary certificate of occupancy, on the current band hall due to egress issues. And basically egress is just the ability to safely vacate students and staff in the event of emergency. And if you go to the next slide, that picture on the left right there, that's the fine arts hallway. So directly to the right behind those lockers is the existing band hall. And to the left is the choir room, as well as the dance room. Exiting out of these hallways, either way, you go directly into construction. So that's why the fire marshal would not allow us to egress kids or egress students across the hallway into one of those classrooms, across the stage into the cafeteria. So the bright side of this, and of course, the picture on the right is the outside of the existing band hall wall, the exterior wall. So the outcome of all this is that we're going to allow Weber to get into this wall early, start the demo process now. This wasn't going to be scheduled until next summer, but by them being able to get in early, we'll get access to that area, and also just basically going to tie the new and existing all together for us. The next slide is just a picture. That wall that I just made reference to is right behind this picture on the left. And then that was back in October, and then a snapshot of what it looked like 2 weeks ago. And then the next photo is the new admin and library. The next slide, please. The new admin and library in October, and the progress that's just been made to November. As you can see, a lot of interior framing, a lot of roof work. And then the last photos for Miller. The millstone for Courtyard 1 is in place actually as of late last week. It's actually been put in place, sort of a stair-step approach. It's going to look nice. And then Area F is the interior framing duct work that's been done. I've done the same thing for De Zavala. If you could go to the next slide, sort of give you a snapshot of what the campus is going to look like. Phase 2, which was a lot of the work that was done last summer, was the two furthest classroom wings on the right. And also sort of in the middle of the campus there, you'll see a music room and an ACL room that was redone. But the phase that we're in right now is the new admin. And if you go to the next slide, that should say phase 1 new admin, not phase 2. I apologize for that. But that's what the new admin is going to look like, along with the courtyard. You see the vestibule where the entrance is. And of course, that's going to tie into the campus straight down that hallway where it says corridor. And then off to the top left, once we're able to get access to the existing admin, we'll be able to tie this into the new area. And I'll give you the next slide. Will show that this next slide is phase 3. So that area right off to the left is the existing admin. So once we get the new admin into the admin into the new admin, we'll start the demo process on that, and you'll see that that phase 3. That's the end product right there. And then for the summer work is the kitchen, and then some remodeling on classroom wings A and B, some remodeling there. So I expect by next board meeting, we're gonna have the new admin in place. So we have a staff move meeting scheduled for November 19th. Actually, it's the 20th. It's this Friday. We're gonna be talking to the staff about moving. We've got new furniture that's going to be set November 30th and December 1st. We've got a TCO scheduled for the week of December 4th. Staff will begin moving their personal items on December 4th. The construction fencing, the access will be taken down that weekend. And on the Monday, December 7th, we'll have the staff in the new admin area. And then demolition begins in the old admin area on December 7th as well. The project schedule is pretty much in line, like what I just talked about. Phase 1, which should have a completion date here at the end of November. And then once again, we talk about working ahead. We're discussing right now the opportunity to do some work over spring break in the classroom hallways, and also looking at maybe getting access to the kitchen right after spring break. But those are early in discussions right now. The last or the next couple of slides are just photos of September, October, and then the last photos is what it looked like 2 weeks ago, and it looks a whole lot different today, but a lot of progress being made. So I would like to extend an opportunity to the board to tour either one of the campuses or both. I would probably recommend that we stay away from De Zavala till maybe after the move, maybe December 9th, 10th. That time frame, and then Miller we can see it at any time, so we can coordinate that. Love to have y'all to come out and see the work that's being done. That's all I have for y'all. If y'all have any questions.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes, Mr. Sandoval. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as to Miller, who was responsible for the staging plan that did not anticipate that fire marshal determination and has the band in the library? Was that staging plan laid out by the architects or by the contractor or by us internally? Because it seems like that should have been predicted.
That's a very good point, and that was solely on the contractor. The contractor felt that we could egress off to the south side of an area that was under construction and out into the parking lot, where in between the band and between the football field and the cafeteria. And when that wasn't going to work, they were hoping that the fire marshal would let them egress across the hallway into a choir room and off the stage in the cafeteria, which we just could not do. But in answer to your question, it was a phasing issue that the architect pretty much leaves it up to the contractor to figure out all egress, access, et cetera, and it just didn't work the way they had hoped.
Thank you.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah. Mr. Superintendent, when we originally approved the Miller renovation plans, we opted at that time not to proceed with the athletic renovations, but we were assured that we might have another option to approve those if we had the expenses available. And given that we now have a healthy fund balance and we have a healthy bond balance, I'm wondering what the window is for reconsidering the additional changes to the athletic facilities.
I think we're going to bring a scope of potential issues, that being one of them. I don't know the time frame, but we are gathering like campus by campus potential issues that the board can at some point add to or change. We're having discuss, like one of them was the electronic signs that was asked about. We don't know if we can do that under bond funds, even though technology was in the bond. So those are questions we're trying to find answers to.
I would just be dismayed if we come back in a couple of months and say, oh, we missed our window because we now are, seems like we're moving ahead with this external window with the band facilities, and given the athletic facilities proximity to those, I will be upset if in 3 months we ask again about it and we've missed the opportunity to do it or to do it cost effectively. So if we can reconsider that sooner than later, I would appreciate it. So.
It will be brought to the board for their decision.
Thanks.
Mr. Redondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu, Mr. Superintendent, Dr. Barton, Mr. Sandoval, whoever needs to answer this. So I know we have a number of projects, the elementary school renovations, the addition and renovations at San Marcos High School. What is the estimated timeline to closing out those projects and recognizing them as fully complete? We are now a year and change past when the high school renovations were supposed to be completed. So what is the status on that being complete or not?
So we're regarding the high school, Mr. Redondo, we're close. There's still some punch list items, but a lot of it is centered around Weber and their ability to get the closing documents finalized. There's something later on in the meeting that I'm going to be bringing to the board regarding an easement. That's part of the closing process. We're going to probably see some ongoing work. It's stuff that or it's items that we can live with. We can use the facility, but it's really up to the contractor to bring the closing documents to us. As far as the 5 campus renovation, we are working with Cadence McShane to close that out. They have a high interest in getting it done by the end of the year. They know what the stipulations are. For the most part, all work is complete, and it's just a matter of them bringing the documents to us. So, like I said earlier, there's two projects right there that'll be finalized here, if not next board meeting, certainly the one after is my expectation.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. And at this point, I'd like to call for a quick 5 to 7 minute break. we're ready for the approval of the consent items. We're going to look at minutes for the regularly scheduled board meeting on October 19th and the special call meeting that we call Agenda Prep on November 2nd.
Ms. Cantu, I move that we approve the consent agenda item with the correction on page 2 of the October 19th with the construction update concerning the name that's listed.
So we have a motion to approve with correction.
I'll second.
Mr. Arredondo seconds.
Can you repeat the second? Not the second, the correction, please.
Page 128, item B, has the wrong last name listed.
Sandoval.
Ready for a vote?
Sandoval, not Bernie Sanders.
I would have been very upset had I missed Bernie Sanders, but.
Do construction update.
All in favor?
Athletic facilities for
6.
everybody.
0 opposed. I'm sorry?
Yeah, she wants to
And-
abstain. I didn't mean to jump in.
Okay, and 1 abstention.
One note on the minutes, I think it would be helpful if, when identifying district staff that present, we included a title. Because years from now, you know, people come and people go, and only Mr. Arredondo can remember every staff position back a decade. And so I think like a title would be useful, like for Mr. Sandoval, that he's construction, whatever, just for posterity's sake.
Good correction. That was the October 19th. Or was your motion including both?
Both.
Okay, so we're good. Items for action, consider approval of the 2020 Comprehensive Financial Report.
I'll move that we approve the 2020 Comprehensive Financial Report.
I'll second.
Provided.
We have a motion to approve the 2020 financial report for Mr. McLaughlin and a second for Mr. Arredondo. All in favor? That's something we did today, 6. Opposed?
You can vote for
You
or
can vote on
against.
it. You can vote for or against. Were you voting for or against? You're voting for. So we have 7-0. Consider approval of district and campus improvement plans.
I move that we approve them.
Ms. Hanson moves. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Viapando seconds.
I just have a question.
Yes?
So I wanted to clarify what's coming back to us to approve in December, because I thought it's the TIF plans that are coming back? Okay.
What did Dr. Reese?
She's out there talking to a parent.
But she said she was bringing something back.
Any changes?
The TIF plans, okay, not these, okay, that's fine.
All in favor? 7, opposed, 0. Consider approval of policy FNG local update.
It's actually in red on 139. In accordance with FNG, the board is not required to address its student participation in extracurricular activities that does not involve violation of right guaranteed by Chapter 26. Complaints regarding extracurricular activities shall be addressed by the district's extracurricular activity committee established by the superintendent. The decision of the extracurricular activity committee shall be final.
Thank you.
I will make a motion to approve FNG. Is it local or legal? Legal? Local, as presented.
I'll second.
And I have questions now.
Motion for Mr. Arredondo and a second for Mr. McLaughlin. Question, Mr.
Yes, so if we're all, for the purposes of discussion, and my colleagues on page 139, we're talking about this section in red regarding extracurricular activity complaints. So does this enacting of policy then prevent someone from bringing forward a grievance through the grievance process? If it's said right here that everything, the decision of the extracurricular activity committee shall be final, does that then negate the grievance process?
It depends on if it's a violation of Chapter 26, and you're going to ask me what Chapter 26 of the Education Code, and I need to research what that is.
So if it's not a violation of Chapter 26, then yes, they would not be allowed to seek redress from the grievance process. Okay, so that is, I guess, my first concern. And then my second concern is if the board is vesting this authority into the superintendent or the administration, does that mean the board gets to appoint or ratify those who are on the extracurricular activity committee, or how does that work?
I don't think the board ratifies the members, to my knowledge. I have to ask Juan Cruz that question.
I guess, again, Mr. Superintendent, I'm supportive of this in theory if a number of things take place. One, the board at least has some say or notification of who are on these extracurricular committees. If we are essentially saying students or community members cannot seek redress through the grievance process. And then similarly, if this were to be enacted or approved by the board tonight, for it to be, at least in my opinion, enforceable, I would hope that we would make some document that students and families sign acknowledging that this policy is effectively changing, so that across all athletics, extracurricular, UIL, student council, whatever that is, everyone is of the understanding that this is a new policy. Not just when we send the student code of conduct out in the handbook and we say, hey, approve this whole thing. Personally, as an individual trustee, I would like all those who are in extracurricular activities to be made aware that this change in policy occurred.
Currently, don't all the students have to sign a student code of conduct?
They do sign an athletic or some type of code of conduct that's on top of the student code of conduct, yes.
Ms. Halsey?
So is the change in this policy coming from TEA in the state, or is this something that we generated locally?
It was sent to us by Juan Cruz to get in alignment with legal policy.
So this keeps us legal?
Is this an existing committee?
It would be a committee that I would put together, kind of like with attendance and discipline and all those committees.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it, but I feel like I need more time to understand this, and I need to understand what Chapter 26 involves before I can make a decision.
So this was Juan's response. Chapter 26 relates to parental rights. The extracurricular committee is appointed by the superintendent, not the board. There are FERPA issues with giving community members information.
About other students?
Yes.
I'm just not sure why the board would want to give up our ability to review the grievances. I'm not sure why we would want to do that.
So you're saying it came from Juan, who got it from TEA as an update
No, it's
needed?
to get into alignment with,
To align us.
with legal policy. And Juan says if we send him the Zoom link, he can jump on and he can answer the questions. He is at the ready this time.
As we wait for Juan.
Do y'all
We
need?
wanna bring this back.
Who's sending him the link? Okay. Okay, so he'll appear? He'll just appear. Did you have a question, Ms. Diapando? While we're waiting?
One clarification, the policy itself says FNG local, but on the red, it says FNG legal. So.
In accordance with FNG legal, so they wanted it to match.
Oh, okay, in accordance with, so we still need to look at the other policy and, I mean, I would want to look at, legal and see,
They're embedding the legal into our local.
yes.
We already,
FNG legal is on page 134.
Oh, okay, okay.
And then on 139 is the
Okay.
So, do we have a question for him?
I think, Ms. Halsey, you had a question for,
Or
Oh, there he is.
is,
Hi, Mr. Cruz. So I'm just wondering if you could explain this policy, like if it's being generated at the local level, if we are abdicating our abilities to review, or if it's just at our discretion, or what the Chapter 26 entails? Explain this policy, like if it's being generated at the local level, if we are abdicating our abilities to review, or if it's just at our discretion, or what the Chapter 26 entails?
Sure.
Explain this policy, like if it's being generated at the local level,
this is a little crazy.
discretion or what the charge.
Is he on?
His audio's.
Hello?
We're having technical difficulties, y'all.
Technical difficulties, y'all. Technical difficulties, y'all.
It's your
No, I seconded this, but I would be supportive of tabling it to December. I don't think it's an urgent change. Obviously, trustees have questions. They want to look at other things. We want to hear from legal counsel. I mean, if I don't, yeah.
If y'all withdraw your motion, and Hugh withdrew your second.
Yes. And we can just.
Then we will table this discussion of the F&G local change. Move that to December agenda.
Okay.
Discussions, action to waive the president's report of board members' continuing education hours as allowed by Texas Commissioner of Education. Earlier, y'all got some kind of notice letting you know that we didn't have to be responsible for training hours, but Ms. Villapando, because she is our TASB delegate to the assembly, attended and has submitted 8 total hours of credit, and we commend Ms. Villapando for doing this. Yay, and thank you for representing us. So,
It was all virtual, thank you.
I move that we approve the waiver.
Ms. Hanson moves that we approve the waiver. Who was the second? Mr. Arredondo seconds.
Thank you, Marge, too.
All in favor? 7 opposed, 0. You've been doing that for a long time, Ms. Villapando, and we really appreciate you being our delegate. Consider approval of contract with Tracey A. Benson Consulting in amount of $52,500 for an equity audit in San Marcos.
I'll move that we approve the contract as provided.
Second.
Mr. McLaughlin moves that we approve the contract with Tracey A. Benson Consulting. Second from Ms. Halsey. Any discussion or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Superintendent, could the board either have a presentation during a regular meeting or have a special workshop with the consultant to talk about the approach, the scope, the questions, the guiding philosophies, et cetera,
Yes.
before we embark on the equity audit?
I think you are a part of the equity audit.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sandoval is waiting at the ready because he was in charge of the RFP, if you have any
Oh,
questions.
okay.
Super. I think this is terrific.
Any other questions on the equity audit or conversation, discussion? So when you said she is part of it, that means all of us are part of it. Okey dokey. All in favor? 7, opposed, 0. Consider approval of City of San Marcos Detention water quality easement at San Marcos High School.
I have questions. Is it Mr. Sandoval?
Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Sandoval, are you dealing with this topic?
Yes.
Is this required? I mean, I thought we already had our certificate of occupancy at the high school. What's triggering this requirement?
So let me read this. The city of San Marcos requires an easement around detention pond for the purposes of access for inspections, enforcing, and cleaning. This is part of the city of San Marcos municipal source discharge plan by the city, in which they report to the EPA. So we have, with the STEM project, the high school, we have a temporary certificate of occupancy. We're trying to get the final occupancy, and this is one of the requirements that's needed for the closing documents.
That answers my question. I didn't realize we were on a temporary. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I move that we approve the easement.
Ms. Hanson moves to approve the easement, and Mr. Redondo seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? 7, 0 opposed. Discussion/action to approve amended resolution adopted one-time employee retention incentive payment for all district employees through the 2021 school year. This was placed on the agenda by Mr. Arredondo. Do you want to speak to this?
Secondly, and the other thing that is included in the resolution is the change in amount, which was originally approved by the board at $500 to $1,000. Whenever the board discussed this at our last meeting, a motion was made immediately for 500s and then allow us to discuss amounts or what the board would support or would not support. So given the fact that we have now seen more than a $9.2 million change in what our forecasted budget was and what we're returning to fund balance. That is why this is on my agenda.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, I move that we adopt the amended resolution adopting a one-time employee retention incentive payment of $1,000 for all district employees through the 2020-2021 school year as described herein.
Motion made by Ms. Halsey to approve this motion, this proclamation as revised, and seconded by Mr. Arredondo. We have a question from Mr. McLaughlin.
I have a comment. So we unanimously passed a retention incentive last month, and it's come back to us changed from $500 to $1,000, and the retention piece is gone. So this isn't, I mean, this is completely different, and I'll get to the process in a bit, but this is just a cash giveaway of taxpayer money with no relationship to educational outcomes. If we wanted to spend $1.2 million from fund balance, when we've hemorrhaged 200 kids in enrollment, we should do it in a way that meets our goals. And for some staff, this rough-handed one amount fits all $1,000 is more than 5% of their annual pay, but for teachers, it's less than 2%. So among those, you'll see a pay jump of more than 5% would include employees who are already out on medical leave and therefore not experiencing any disruption or added work from COVID, or those whose workload has actually dropped because we're serving less lunches or less food service, and employees whose job responsibilities in our teachers in some cases have had to double their efforts in order to keep up with kids in person and kids virtually are seeing a pay bump that's not even equal to a week's pay. So when it was $500, that was a compromise figure that we all came together after discussing this for 3 straight months. And now it's come back to us doubled. And that's not even getting the method. From what I understand, Mr. Arredondo, I guess either drafted this motion or got it from Juan Cruz rather than our normal process of how a board president picks us up. Is that right, Ms. Cantu, or did you ask for this wording?
I did not ask for this wording. It came to me from Juan Cruz. And Mr. Arredondo did copy me, so I knew that he was asking for help on the wording of this because it's more like a resolution different from most of our motions.
And so then we have an agenda prep meeting 2 weeks ago, and everybody has an opportunity to talk about what should be on the agenda, and we all attend this thing and make time for it. And at the end of the administration presentation, trustees are able to offer agenda items. There's no mention of this. It doesn't come up until after Mr. Arredondo moves into a runoff for mayor. And so, to me, it at least looks like Mr. Arredondo is using taxpayer money to try to gin up some votes for his race, and I don't think that's appropriate. I asked the board president to move this until after the runoff, and I was told Mr. Arredondo wanted it right now, only now. Ms. Halsey was a second, and so the board president put it on. So I just think it looks bad, smells bad, it's not the normal process, the way things are supposed to go, and it doesn't achieve any educational outcomes, so I'm opposed.
Did you want to speak?
I do.
Ms. Mejia?
Yes. So I have a question for Dr. Barton. If we approve this, how will we look financially for the spring semester?
This resolution would incur $600,000 more in spending from this budget year. It would be a one-time expenditure, not an ongoing expenditure like a general pay increase. And if the trustees were to vote in favor of this evening, it would be melded into the budget amendment that's next on our agenda.
Ms. Halsey?
Mr. McLaughlin, I have somewhat of an issue with your comment because I think that I've been pretty consistently for the last 8 months advocating for increased pay for all of our staff, and that has been met repeatedly by members of this board with a variety of arguments, including yours previously, which was that you didn't want to give COVID bonuses, where what you've just suggested sounds like what you would be in favor of is a COVID bonus. Because when we tried to increase the percentage that we were going to increase salaries by, we were told we could only do this much, but we could potentially consider something later in the year. And so that's what we're trying to do. And so I also really brickle at your insinuation that this is politically motivated, so.
I didn't suggest it was politically motivated by you, Ms. Halsey, but in direct response, if we're going to spend $1.2 million on compensation, let's do it in a way that fits what we're aiming to do in compensation. Let's do it in a way that is a significant bump in places where we feel one is warranted or where additional work is being done. Not just a broad $1,000 thrown out of a helicopter. I mean, we pay people different rates because they do different work. And when you stretch the idea of a one-size-fits-all bonus this far, it becomes disproportionate. As I said, it's more than 5% raise for some. It's less than 2% for teachers. And from everything I've understood, the teachers are the ones whose workload has increased most significantly on account of COVID, and this doesn't account for that at all. It's just a blind cash giveaway. And so if we're going to spend money, let's spend it in ways that further our goals or that fit within our compensation formula. That was the point I was making.
Well, then I would love to see a proposal from you that made such an argument, because all I've heard from you is like, let's negotiate between somewhere so that everybody's happy, and I certainly wasn't happy with where the vote was last time.
You voted for it.
Yeah, because if I didn't want to vote against the raise.
So if this came up in agenda prep and we decided we want to redo compensation at the mid-year, then we could have that discussion. But it came to us as a finished motion, which was initially just supposed to clean up whether folks would have to pay it back if they left for health-related reasons, which I think we were all generally, or I didn't poll anyone, but I think that everybody would be supportive of the idea that if you leave for health-related reasons, we're not going to take the $500 out of your last check. But what it came to us as is something way broader than that. And that's not the process or the way things work. We usually do these things collaboratively, which we did in this. We had this item on for 3 straight months. We found something that got a broad consensus, and then it comes back to us double that with different terms. And that's just not, I mean, I don't think that's a way to build trust among the group, honestly. I mean, an open conversation, which is what the last motion was. It was, someone made a motion, but the agenda item was broad and would cover anything. Excuse me?
Completely jammed through. That was not respecting the integrity of the process.
I disagree.
The agenda item allowed for us to do whatever there was a consensus for. This item is either we approve this idea from 2 trustees, which wasn't made until after agenda prep and after, I mean, at least it looks like it was made, well, we know it was made after Mr. Adjourn qualified for a runoff. So if that's not the purpose and doing it right now in a rush, then we should wait until we can have a more fulsome discussion of how we do compensation and what serves our compensation ends.
Ms. Hanson, did you want to say something?
Yes. Just like Mr. McLaughlin, this is the 4th time we're spending board time on an increase in pay. We've already given a pay raise to all employees. This is no longer a retention payment. October, it was a 7-0 vote. We had plenty of time for discussion, and it ended up being, everybody agreed to $500 retention pay. We have ongoing COVID expenses that we don't know for sure. We don't know how long this is going to last, how much more the district is going to put in, if we get any more money from the state or feds at all. We know food service is down, so we are having to assist in payroll at the tune of $250,000 a month, which by the end of this fiscal year will be $2.5 million. I just don't see how we can afford $1.2 million right now. The whole purpose was give some now, and then if we look and find our finances allow us to, look at adding another retention amount.
I myself am for the 1,000, but 500 this approved October amount, and let them get that ready through payroll, and then have another 500 if we need to February, March time, so that we still give them 1,000 and give them some now and some later, and that kind of gives them a little extra money right before Christmas and then maybe right before spring break. I'm for giving them as much help as we can, particularly our teachers. In my conversation with Dr. Barton today, he was reminding me that we have kept a lot of hourly people employed when there was no work for them. What was it that we talked about earlier? Could you remind me?
Yes, ma'am. We spoke about the board and the district's continuing commitment to our child nutrition department and transportation departments specifically, where we haven't been able to run routes for kids from March until we were back in school this year. And also our meals were dramatically down. Those teams shifted what they were doing, and a lot of them it didn't look like before, and we were committed to not having anyone lose their employment. As we'll see in a few minutes when we look at the budget amendment, we're going to now commit funds each month to support child nutrition because we've exhausted their general fund because of that commitment.
And yet we have a net gain of $9 million.
They're two different funds, ma'am. The child nutrition fund and the general fund are separate.
Right, but I'm saying that we have, in the same time period, realized a net gain of $9 million in the general fund.
There is the income for child nutrition comes from meals. And so when we were not serving meals, it did not generate income, and that's why they're different.
Right, I understand that,
But as an organization, the entire balance spreadsheet, we're recognizing a $9 million projected difference.
I think everybody here realizes that the $8.3 million deficit budget you were asked to approve the previous June wasn't the reality. We checked in mid-year when I had the opportunity to work with you last year, and we realized what it actually looked like half of that. And then again, as I said, with the ability or the lack of ability to make the expenditures we wanted to make, that's how we saw that swing.
I would be willing to amend my motion to continue with the $500 that was previously voted on, if we can remove the stipulation that the employee must maintain some arbitrary, whatever, goal, meet that goal. If we will then tonight commit to having a serious conversation in January about how we are going to appropriately remunerate our faculty, staff, employees at large through the spring semester, and begin the conversations about what it looks like to have additional pay increases for next year, because I know that surrounding districts have already done second pay increases, even though we had to make it in some form of a incentive. So I feel like we've gotten many different messages. It can't be a bonus. You didn't want to do a COVID bonus, but then we couldn't do this amount of percentage increase because we didn't know what our funds were going to look like. Well, we now know what they look like, but we don't want to have that conversation again. So I think that we have agreed to some things, yes, on paper, but I don't think that we have achieved consensus.
Ms. Villapando, did you have your hand up?
Yes, our budget process starts in January, I think, right? And so we start planning for the next year. And we already know that this year, because of the unforeseen expenses, having to transfer general funds into the nutrition program, that we're seeing we may have more of a deficit than we had planned. And so I'm in favor of your going back to 500. And when we start the budget process, let's look at see how we're going to end up, and we can plan for that in that budget. I think this budget is, we need to just stay with what we've already approved, and then go forward from here and see how we're going to end up at the end of the year, and let's see what we can do next year in the next budget.
But I feel like we keep doing that, and we keep putting it off, and we keep putting it off, which is why we keep bringing it back and keep bringing it back.
But we didn't have a chance to discuss it properly, as Mr. McLaughlin mentioned. But that's all I have to say. I'm not going to argue.
Mr. Arredondo, you've had your hand up, and then Ms. Mejia after Mr.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Cantu. So first, I would just like to respond to Mr. McLaughlin. It's unfortunate that I was on the ballot for re-election in May because advocating for COVID-19 hazard pay in May was connected to my re-election, purportedly. When our elections were moved to November and continued throughout the summer to advocate for more support to our ISD staff, again, it was always connected to my proximity or the timeliness of an election. So, I mean, unless we institute a board policy where trustees who are on a ballot in the same fiscal year that we're voting on cannot speak or advocate for those positions, then there's always going to be some perception that people are advocating for something. So I will not advocate a stance that I've historically held in election years or not. to provide for our ISD employees, especially those least paid across the community. Secondly, Ms. Hanson, you immediately made the motion right out of the gate at the last board meeting to force our entire board to decide on the $500 amount. So to say that there was robust conversation or opportunity for input and dialogue and compromise is just a misleading statement, because it's a political strategy to make a motion right out the gate. And the only way that it could be revisited based on board policy is if someone from the prevailing side of the issue could bring it back. So to cite the fact that some of us voted for it and brought it back, it's Robert Rules of Order, and when you would abuse that as board president, I'm just following a precedent set by you to follow Robert's Rules of Order. I welcome more discussion and dialogue about this in future months, whether I'm on the board or not, regardless of any other election I might be running for, because a month ago, when I brought up a disparity between the folks making six figures and those making on the lower end of the spectrum, it was commented by my colleagues on this board that it was fine, 500 across the board. Now we hear from Mr. McLaughlin that we wanted some differentiation for teachers. You bring a proposal back that gives teachers adequate compensation for the work they've been doing, I will second that motion or that proposal. But no one has brought anything to this board except at the last board meeting where someone immediately spit out $500 and someone immediately seconded it. So to talk about us having this conversation for months at a time and a dialogue and compromise, it wasn't a dialogue and it wasn't a compromise. We settled for something that we could all agree on, which was something that someone made a motion for and a second. But like Ms. Halsey said, if this comes back in January to talk about salary benefit increases, mid-year raises, whatever that looks like, I welcome that conversation because it has not happened. Instead, individual trustees have been throwing out numbers for months at a time, and people have cited why they won't vote for it, which is money. And our auditor's report clearly shows we're flush with cash. And every time we go through salary and benefit increases, we're always told that we're going to bankrupt the district. Our fund balance has more than doubled since I was elected to this board. And some folks who have been on this board as twice as long as I have continuously cite financial concerns. And none of those misstatements have ever come to fruition when it comes to why we have been so conservative in salary and benefit increases. So I'm really tired of hearing that we just don't have the money, because if you look at the size of our fund balance, we've had the money the entire time.
Ms. Mejia had her hand up next, and then Mr. McLaughlin, and then Ms. Halsey.
To follow up on Mr. Arredondo's comment, being the new trustee, I don't hear that we don't have the money. It's more like we're in a pandemic. We need to be smart about spending our money. And for me, $1,000 right now is a lot to be giving to our employees. Now, I support Ms. Cantu's idea of splitting up the $1,000, $500 each semester. Or even, if we revisit, I'm all for, the 500 for December and then revisiting possibly, in January.
But we would have to adjust the motion. Who was next, Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, as to Mr. Arredondo's initial straw man, I didn't accuse you of any political gamesmanship with either prior proposal. This is the first time I've ever suggested that. And I said it had the appearance of it because of the timing of when this came out. We didn't bring it up at agenda prep. It gets sprung on. I don't find out about it till the other day when I was driving out of town and we were inside the 7 days. I thought the agenda was finalized, so it has that appearance. I don't know whether it is or not. Only you would know that. I do agree you generally have been supportive of increased pay. And we generally agree on compensation proposals, so I don't want to get past that or make it too personal. But what I think is floating around, and I hear as the challenge, is that we were told we were in dire financial position when we approved the budget, and we approved a small raise. But the way to fix that, in my view, is not a cash payment here or a cash payment there, driven by the board with numbers we just come up with that don't factor into teacher retirement, don't factor into their compensation in future years, but it's to do a more robust salary and benefit increase in the spring that's led from administration, where salary and benefit changes usually come, and meets our educational objectives, of doing, in some years, I think we did 5% for teachers our first year. This year we did something much smaller. Was it 1%? Refresh my memory, 1%, 2%. But maybe because we did have a budget surplus, and we obviously misfigured revenues and expenses on the good side, but at the same time we relied upon that inaccurate information to give a small raise when we were probably in position to do 3 or 4%. And so when we come back in the spring, if we can do something larger, I would be supportive of that. And I think that would more broadly address what we're trying to do here, rather than random 500, random 500. I just don't think that's the appropriate strategy for compensation.
Ms. Hanson had her hand up next.
I agree, Mr. McLaughlin. I think having a well planned out compensation package is much more important. I just have concerns about spending $1.2 million at this time. And Ms. Halsey amended her motion to 500, but I didn't hear anything about the employee resigning for health reasons. I think that before we add that in, it needs to be fully fleshed out. Who makes that decision? What do they have to bring in? Does it have to be COVID related? All those kinds of things I think has to be determined ahead of time and not left to Dr. Baez to all of a sudden come up with all that information and everybody hating her because it didn't match what I needed. And let's say I want to retire and I can put it as health reasons for some way. Would I be able to keep it instead of just resigning? So that's my concern is.
I think when that originated was to help those hourly people that have a small paycheck. They're paid twice a month, right? And so if they don't get that much money, I would like for the superintendent or maybe Dr. Baez or someone to have consideration of those people that maybe it's a medical reason that they have to quit. A lot of times when our teachers leave or quit, is because they've got maybe another job that they're going to. But most people don't leave in the middle of the semester, right? They leave only because of medical reasons or emergencies like a car accident and those kinds of things. We don't have people just quit in January, February, March just to go somewhere else to work. Most of them, I would think that they're leaving if they're professional, teachers, administrators. I think that that's something that we need to give consideration to, their extenuating circumstances. And so the conversation started with Mr. Arredondo thinking about the hourly people, that they draw such a small paycheck, especially if it's in two checks, that it would probably be close to their whole paycheck, and they may have had that earmarked for their rent or for a big doctor bill or something. So I totally agree that we should have this exception. Who's going to make the exception? I would think that the administrator would be able to. Ms.
My
Halsey?
intent was that everybody would get the payment without any obligation, that anybody who's employed, say, on December 1st, receives the $500 payment, and there's no obligation.
Oh, you're not putting in the payback?
No, none, zero. And I also want to remind us that when we were considering raises last summer, administration proposed a stipend and a mid-year stipend, and Ms. Hanson, you advocated for that at the time, and the board decided to go against administration and to create a compensation plan. But also some of the funds we just heard tonight that we now have in excess are one-time funds. We're not going to have them as reoccurring funds. So I think that we have so many different factors going on, and as we continue to bicker about it, then our employees are continuing to suffer. And other districts are making those changes mid-year, and I don't understand why we will not. So,
Mr.
I'm happy
Arredondo?
to amend my motion as such, if we will commit to having that conversation in January.
Okay, so that would change the motion that's currently on the floor.
No, that was what, well, I mean, I said it, I made the original motion. I will change that motion to make it $500, and there's no,
Which we've already approved.
no payback obligation for anybody if whatever circumstances happen in their life that make them unable to fulfill their full contract. And then the board in January will talk about a second mid-year increase of some kind, and also begin conversations about what our increase structures will look like for the coming year. That is what I would like to have happen.
In the past, we've looked at budget starting in January, because I remember Mr. Arredondo bringing that up, not last year, the year before, that we would start looking at our budget early so that we can start making plans. You had your hand up again, Mr. Arredondo?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Cantu. I agree with Mr. McLaughlin. I think on like 90% of the things we always agree, including salary and benefit increases, and he balances out my wanting to pay everyone a lot. So I appreciate that. But so we don't run down this bunny trail more than we already have. Individually, again, I'm fine going back to 500, and whether I'm here or not, I'm going to be coming back to talk about more for ISD employees in December and January. But with that being said, I welcome that we amend the resolution to include at a minimum the caveat to allow the administration flexibility to not require employees to pay it back due to health-related reasons. I don't think that needs to be fleshed out by this board anymore. I think any conversation of doing so is just a delay tactic, in my opinion. I think we can trust our human resources department and office and staff and the superintendent to move forward accordingly with that expectation and that guidance. And it's not just for custodians or food service employees, but for anyone at any level in the organization. If they have to leave for catastrophic reasons, I want them to not have to pay back what is not even going to be $500 after taxes are taken out and it's reflected in their paycheck. So again, I think it's just a kick at them as they're leaving under, unordinary circumstances that we say, hey, we're going to deduct this from your last paycheck.
Okay,
So-
Ms. Stefando, you had your hand up?
I'm confused because we already voted for the 500.
Yes.
So, and so now this other motion is another 500?
No.
It's the existing 500 that we've
It's the
already agreed.
existing
It's just the
500.
stipulation on it would be removed.
Oh, okay.
So this conversation has now gone to removing the exception to reimburse.
Correct.
That's the net effect of the amended motion by the move-in and the second. I mean, we went on information provided to us that a retention bonus or retention incentive was the means we had to do it, and we got that information, I thought, from legal counsel, but then legal counsel has blessed removing that restriction. So I'm fine with removing that restriction. I think we can trust that our people, aren't going to leave the day after they get the $500 unless something requires them to do so.
I think so too.
So who seconded the
Wait,
motion?
so,
The resolution stays the same except for the removing of,
The amount. So I move that we,
okay, the resolution has to change to 500 because we've already approved it, but I don't see that we need to leave that in since that's already been voted on. Correct? We voted on that last month. That's why we have a budget transfer after this motion.
can we just amend the third whereas where it gives the caveat of the retention incentive?
First, we probably need to take back the motion that was currently on.
I will remove my motion.
And somebody has to take their second back? Who
It was
seconded?
Arredondo.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my second.
And she's
Okay, you'll take it back.
removing the amended motion?
Yeah, we removed the amended motion, just make a clean one, I guess.
So now we're just going to say that on the resolution approved in October, we are removing the payback part. Is that correct?
We're approving the no payback.
Well, I think we would need to amend the originally approved resolution to include the language, whereas the district shall be reimbursed by any employee with the exception of employees resign for health-related reasons, depending on what the motion is made. Because that was the overwhelming concern that I had, was that employees would have to pay it back.
Well, do you just want to make that motion?
Can you just word that motion, since
Yeah,
it was
okay.
already approved, so now we need a motion to change that?
Okay, then I move that the district, or that the board, amend the original employee retention incentive payment resolution to include, whereas the district shall be reimbursed by any employee with the exception of employees who resign for health-related reasons who receive the one-time employee retention incentive payment if the employee does not remain employed by the district, either voluntarily or involuntarily, through the conclusion of the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
Did you second?
I'll second that motion, yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Was there anyone else need to say something? All in favor? Any opposed? 0. Okay, the last item is the approval of the budget amendments.
On page 157, you'll find 2 budget amendments. Budget Amendment 6 supports the retention incentive that was previously approved and then affirmed just now. It is $562,000 from the general fund spread out into functions based on where employees' positions are. And then it is $39,477 in transfer to child nutrition. All total, it's $601,000, as we previously discussed. Amendment 7 opens a new conversation that we expected, but we didn't know our timeline. Again, because we've kept child nutrition running since March, we've been using the general fund to pay salaries, but we have not had sufficient meals to keep that general fund healthy. There is hope that as we get more students on campus and as we get into months that are full with days not spent on vacation, we will be able to catch up. But right now, this is the full brunt of payroll for the next month, and it is $242,536 transferring out from general fund to child nutrition.
Mr. Barton, are we freezing hires in that department presently, like replacements, like when someone steps down or leaves until it stabilizes, or have we taken any of those steps?
Yes, sir. We've done one. We haven't let anybody go, obviously.
Right. It's not.
But
Yeah.
we used the TASB staffing survey that we received as a district last year, and Human Resources brought the team together. We reevaluated our department based on that, and we were able to find some efficiency. So yes, we have frozen some positions, but right now there are a couple people sitting in those positions. So again, we haven't removed employment from anybody, but we will continue to attrition down and get a little bit more efficient over the course of this year.
Thanks.
Ms. Ms. Hanson?
I move that we approve the budget amendments as presented.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Hanson and seconded by Mr. Arredondo that we approve the budget transfers as presented. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor? 7. Opposed? 0.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Move to adjourn from Ms. Hanson, second from Mr. McLaughlin. All in favor? 7. Opposed? 0.